Hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about problems that Colin and I have been going through uh, for the past 4 years. We have lived in 4 houses. We have rented because buying for us is just not a good option. And especially since we came to live in England in this new house, things have been very, very tough. Some of you will know a little bit of our problems, others won't. But this is basically something that happens to a lot of people in the UK. I'll aim to make a series of vlogs where I can explain everything because the state of tenants' rights in the UK is dire. We are a huge group of people. There are more and more people renting all the time and without the most basic human rights. Just to give you an idea, years ago, landlords used to rent their homes usually privately, and there was a bond between a landlord and the tenants. And I'm not at all talking about council houses that I know nothing about. I'm talking about the private sector. So you'd go find yourself a landlord in an advert or something, and you'd get to know that person would get to know you. And of course, like with everything in life, there are problem tenants, problem landlords. But I think for the most part, everything went well. People rented for many, many years sometimes. And it was part of life, like in my country, Portugal, where people like my parents, and they were not even that badly off, but they chose to rent all their lives. And my parents rented, I don't know, for maybe over 40 years, 50 years, in two houses. There were no agencies, nothing. Then I think that at a certain point in time here in the UK, there were so many problems. For some reason, I don't understand why, because in many countries, the rental process is quite straightforward. And the government here in the UK, long before I came to live here, because I only came here 7 years ago, decided that landlords needed so many insurances and courses, and everything became so very complicated that either they went through an agency, either their lives were really very difficult, and most landlords thought, well, then better pay an agency. What happened is that the more people are involved and the more people are getting money out of it, the more expensive, of course, everything gets. And that happens to rents as well. Rents in the UK now are very, very high. And I think that in the end, the agencies did not solve anything. It's an extra revenue for the government. The link between landlords and tenants has been broken. Agencies have no souls. Agencies are there just to make money. They don't care. They'll rent you anything. If tenants try to raise their voices, they will often be evicted, because you have something here that does not exist in a lot of countries, which is the no-fault evictions, meaning an agency or a landlord can give you 2 months, they tell you to go, and nobody cares. Are you being evicted because you raised your voice, because you wanted your rights respected? Nobody cares. If you try to go to court, you'll find out that courts are there, but in Wales they are actually quite expensive. This happened to us a couple of years ago, so I know, actually in 2017. There are a lot of organizations that are supposed to help you. Usually, when you really need help, you find out that that help does not exist. I have learned a huge amount about tenancy problems, about all this array of organizations, charities. In the end, you are on your own. We were evicted in 2017 after 4 months in a property with huge problems. And in the beginning, we thought we could fight it, and the reality was that we couldn't. So just to give you a little bit of our story, I met Colin in 2016. I was just coming out of a very difficult divorce. We started dating. I was living in a lovely one-bedroom apartment in a lovely part of Cardiff in Wales. And the apartment started having a lot of mold. We couldn't understand why. The agency would do nothing. The owners appeared a couple of times to have a look and try to clean a little bit, but for the most part, it was Colin and I cleaning the mold. That ended up affecting my health big time. It was mostly in the bedroom because Colin did not live there. He was luckily better off, but I lived there full time. The mold started spreading ever more. I became really very ill. I sang on the X Factor UK for the judges in 2017, and to give you an idea, I was so ill that I was on steroid injections. Otherwise, I couldn't have sung. I was ill for many months with chest infections and all kinds of things. But of course, I tried to complain to the agency. The agency didn't want to hear because for them, tenants as a rule are nobody. They are cash cows. They make money from. Actually, in the past, when I arrived in the UK, this same agency, another office, rejected me because I am not British. I have an accent. I am darker. And they told me, go somewhere else. You don't need to rent through us. A couple of years later, this other office did rent me a property. When I told them this past story, they didn't apologize. They didn't do an internal inquiry. They did not, invite me to the office. No, well, I'm just a tenant. I had quite a few problems in that property as well, like the boiler was almost stopping working, but they told me maybe the landlord does not want to replace the boiler. I was paying a high rent. How could they tell me that a boiler is not going to be replaced? Did they want me to replace it, maybe? It took a lot of fighting and a lot of trouble for the boiler to be replaced. When I signed the contract, the house had not really been cleaned. There seemed to be compost in the drawers, in some of the cupboards and wardrobes. When I complained, they told me that I could clean it myself. When I said at the end, don't expect me to clean the apartment. I mean, clean properly, but don't be too finicky. At the end, they were making problems because there were 3 grains of rice in a kitchen drawer. So bad are they. And they are mostly that bad. They kind of demand everything from the tenants while giving absolutely nothing back, not even respect. I got out of bed, although I was very, very ill. I connected with politicians, and I managed to be to get the information that the council could assess the apartment, and if structural work was needed, they would force the landlords to do it. That happened. Actually, the landlords were very, very nice people, but as a rule, I was connected to the agency, not to the landlords, and that was the problem, as it always is. So, because it was a one-bedroom apartment, I had to move out. I got some compensation. Colin said, let's go and live together. We'll put a bit more money on the table. You need to heal. You need a space to rest and go on singing, everything. We found a nice house with place for our home studio, with so many problems from day one. You'd not believe it. You'd not believe it. A lot more expensive than my previous apartment because it was a lot more spacious. It was detached. It was a complete nightmare. Everything we had been promised had not been done. Moreover, Colin arrived. There was a lady doing the inventory, started screaming at him, thinking that he was the landlord, and saying this house is not fit to be rented out. The kitchen was so dirty, you'dn't believe it. We had seen it on a second viewing, but we were told, oh no, don't worry, of course there's still a couple of weeks before you move in. They promise you everything. One thing we have learned now is that because you don't take a tape recorder or it's not done in writing, they'll always try to say that you're lying. Anyway, so responsible, hardworking taxpayers like us, we are senior citizens, but we are treated like rubbish. Before you'd say like animals, but nowadays it's not permitted anymore to treat animals this bad. And we could not use the garage because it was full of building debris. We had a window where the cold air was all going in, double glass, but it did not close. We had a bit of the wall in the dining room had been ripped off. The dirt was everywhere. The carpets, we had been promised that they would be cleaned, had never been cleaned. And it's just so much wrong with that house. There was even part of the bath water, not all for some reason. Some part of the bath water was probably going into the pipes, but part of the bath water of one of the bathrooms was leaking into the lights of the living room. So bad it was. We had seen a stain on the ceiling before we moved in. We had inquired before we signed. We had inquired what that was. We were told those were past problems, have been solved. Actually, for a house of that price, the stain should have been painted and everything, but they don't care, There are a lot of tenants and nobody needs to show any respect for tenants. 4 months later, we received what's called a Section 21, meaning that you have been evicted. We had never heard of it. I was very, very distraught. For many days, I could not sleep. I had never heard of anybody who had been evicted, not from, a normal house. This was not an antisocial neighborhood or anything. And we discovered that anybody can be evicted. They don't need to give a reason. They just tell you go. So you have settled in a house. By then, all our problems have more or less been solved, and it's time to pack everything again and go. When we move, we have the recording studio. I cook a lot. I have a well-equipped kitchen, so we don't just have a couple of suitcases. And even if you did, you settle in a certain neighborhood and you don't want to go looking, searching again, especially for us, space for the studio, everything. Suppose we had children and we just would have to move somewhere else. Probably they would go to another school. Tenants in UK have virtually no rights. First, I sunk into a big depression. Then I thought, no, this can't be right. I mean, we are in the UK, we were in Wales. This is considered first world. There are rules, there are. So then I, got up. I decided we are going to fight these. There must be organizations. We don't have a lot of money for lawyers, and there is no legal aid anymore, which in fact leaves law-abiding citizens with no access to justice whatsoever. And that is also something that is not known outside of the UK, but it is really terrible. Either you are very rich and you pay for it, either you are very poor, the government pays for it, you are in between. The costs of solicitors are so horrendous that nobody will help you, so you have to accept that you don't have rights. So I started researching, I started making phone calls. All these, when you are already very traumatized, is absolutely terrible. You are already so tired and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where you are going to go. We found out that indeed there is Citizens Advice Bureau, there is shelter, there is back then there was the ombudsman. Then we had 2 months to either solve the problem or try to solve the problem and find a new house. That's not a lot of time. So we knew that we had a small slot to find a solution, and then we really had to start looking for a new house, which is what happened. Phoning somewhere, oh, we only protect landlords. Phoning somewhere else, oh, I think those other ones, they are on side of landlords, so you have no chance. Then somewhere else it takes 2 weeks to make an appointment. Then you find out that you are in the wrong place. Then you can make an appointment somewhere else, and it's another 2 weeks. Then you contact somebody a number of times on the phone. You send emails. You explain the whole story. But then after a couple of weeks, you hear that you were at the wrong office, and it takes another 2 weeks, because it's always 2 weeks, to make an appointment in another office, and we never got absolutely anywhere. So we had to start looking for a house. In the meanwhile, I think that the owner of the house started realizing that he probably had to make a huge mistake, because when he said, okay, you could stay, and we said, okay, with a 1-year contract. But he also said, you don't open your mouth ever again about any repairs. And it is 6 months, it's not 1 year. So we thought, if anything goes wrong, we have to live with it, which is not right, and especially not at that price. Although people should always have rights, it doesn't matter the price of the house. If you pay less, you have a more simple house, smaller, but you should still have rights. And 6 months, no, because 6 months go by very fast, and would be maybe looking for a house again. So we decided to look for a house. We are very, very lucky in such a small space of time. We did find a house. Was slightly more expensive, but it was the price the landlord was trying to negotiate, because in fact what you wanted was he did the repairs, but we'd be paying for them through a higher rent. We said no. In the meanwhile, we signed the other contract. Before we signed the contract, we had a maybe 1 hour appointment with the new agency. We told them everything that had happened. We told them we don't want this to happen again. We want appliances working. We want the promised work to be done. We don't want trouble ever again. Yeah, and you guessed it. The problem started right from the beginning of the tenancy in that second house. But going back to the previous house, after we moved out, the landlord lost out on a few months of rent because he was not being able to rent it out for some reason. he looked for a second agency, so we had two agencies working to try to rent out the house. The agency we had rented it through ended up losing the contract because it was the new agency that rented it out, so everybody lost out. Interestingly enough, I think it was before we got the Section 21 and were evicted, the agency told us that we are actually terrific tenants, which I believe we are. We always leave a house looking better than when we moved in, and we are great people. We are, you know, law-abiding, nice people. So we started our life in our new house, again with very, very big problems. The paint work we had been promised wasn't done. The outside storage we badly needed because there was no garage. It had been converted in a big room we used for our studio. We had never been able to see it, and it was full of furniture of the owners. The conservatory was leaking water, and it went on leaking for 1 year on the dining table. When the previous tenants moved out, there were holes on the walls, and nobody was prepared to repair them. It was a complete nightmare. We had a conservatory. We could open one door, but we couldn't open the other doors and windows, so the temperature would go to 50 degrees centigrade. The garden shed we would need to put our garden stuff with the snow. The roof had caved in, and nobody was prepared to repair it. The garden gate was very broken. They were not prepared to do anything. There was a very big dried out Christmas tree in the garden. The garden was not that big, so a big dried out Christmas tree is not a good thing. We had to fight all the way, and a lot of stuff got more or less solved. A lot of others didn't, and all the time we were of course afraid that we'd be evicted again. We were still working on my singing career. We are people in their 60s. We are becoming very tired, desperate, still trying to make something about of our lives. This all was not good for our relationship either. We managed to stay in that house for 2 years. The second year was a little bit more plain sailing because whatever was going to be repaired had been repaired, and the rest was never going to be repaired. Let's be honest about it, because when they can get out of not doing something, they are not going to do it. We were counting, or at least I was very much hoping to stay at least another year because we liked the location, the house was very nice, I could walk to my singing lessons, and yeah, why move again? We got a phone call saying that the owners were coming back from the United States and we had to leave. They couldn't give us dates. We had no idea. It could have been so we got the call probably at the end of last year. It could have been till now August, or it could have been May. So I said to Colin, why don't we go to England? It will be a much bigger effort financially, but then again, at our age, our slot to make something out of our life is quite short. So why not make a big investment? Go for it. We'll be closer to London. New start, Cardiff had also become associated with a huge amount of problems. We are both tired, and so it kind of gave us a breath of fresh air. We are going somewhere new. Let's go. Maybe things in England are better. Laws in England seemed to progress a bit faster than in Wales. In Scotland, they progress even faster. In Wales, we had been, and sometimes me alone, giving interviews on the radio and on TV on behalf of tenants through a charity called Shelter that also is supposed to help tenants and homeless people. But the interviews, sometimes we could record a 1 hour or more. The journalists and the cameraman and everything would come to our house. They would record a lengthy interview, and then the only thing almost you'd see on TV was, oh, yes, we were evicted, and oh, I didn't know, it was terrible. So it was more or less us playing victims instead of being us showing what is wrong with the rental sector and what is wrong with the agency. So that was maddening. And at a certain point in time, I said, no more. If it is a real interview, if you really want to hear what we have to say, yes. If not, no. Once I also wrote an article for a magazine. The important parts were all taken out. I gave radio interviews, which were 5 minutes or so, so it was all useless. Also on TV, they always focused on kind of council tenants and tenants who create a lot of problems. Not that private tenants can't create problems and that there aren't council tenants who are not very decent people, but they always tried to go back to that old idea of tenants from hell. No. A lot of people are people like us, are people with families, are people with jobs, are people who just want a place to live and pay a lot more for it too. Why don't we buy? First, because nobody should be forced to buy. If we want to rent, rent is legal and we should have the right to rent in a decent way. We should have rights and we shouldn't have been told, oh, you have got to buy. Recently, a doctor, I know she was trying to help, but told me, if you can't get a mortgage, which is one of our problems at our age, no bank gives us a mortgage because, of course, if we are not that, we are almost that. She said, but why don't you buy in a trailer park? Why do I have to go and buy a house first, which I don't want to buy? And why do I have to go to a trailer park? It really did. I felt humiliated. She also said, why don't you go back to your country? I think this is something that nowadays you should not say. Of course, I can go back to my country. I'm an European. I'm here legally. If I want to stay, I stay. If I want to go, I go. And I can go legally to a lot of other countries. But why do I have to leave the country just because me and millions of other people, a lot of them British, have no rights? That didn't sit well with me. I was talking to her because last Sunday I probably have had an anxiety attack and I was feeling very, very ill. And I know she was trying to help, but it didn't feel good. Everybody should have rights, and me too. It's everybody. So, going back with my story, we were very upbeat. We started, or Colin started looking for houses because it's Colin's domain. He knows the regions and he knows where to go, and so he does all that research. And we came to England a few times. It's quite expensive because sometimes we'd stay the night. It's a long trip, but we came a few times. We saw quite a diversity of houses. And our criteria was that we wanted to be closer to London. We can't live in London because we can't afford it. Otherwise, I would gladly live in London. Here, very close by, we have the train. It is an hour from London, so it seemed a very good choice. This is also Oxfordshire is a region where Colin lived in the past, and he liked it. We are further away from the beach, which is a pity, but well, you have to make choices. we visited this house with an agency that Colin had heard terrible things in the past, but we are talking decades ago. So I told him it doesn't need to be that way now. And we can't pick and choose agencies because if you like a house, and especially in our circumstances where we need to be in a quiet location, we need to have a biggish room for the studio, he needs a room for his drums, we need to be detached because we can't have any noise from neighboring properties. Um, and the interactions with the agency seemed nice enough. They would even call us and say, oh, we have this other house, which most agencies nowadays don't care. So we thought they were proactive, they were quite nice. We came to see this house, and first when they sent the advert, Colin said, oh, it's too big, it has 2 garages, it was quite expensive, so it on paper it didn't seem like anything that would be suitable for us. And but then we decided we were in the area anyway to come and have a look, and we thought actually it's very good. This very quiet location, a cul-de-sac, a beautiful garden, very nice to film videos, very good kitchen for our cookery videos with a bit of an island and very spacious. So we started negotiating because when we arrived for the first viewing, there was something very strange. The young lady said there are 2 garages, but the landlady would like to keep one. That's very strange because usually that should be told on the in the advert. And we said, okay, if it suits her, we don't really need 2 garages, and then we can negotiate the price. She was also going to replace the floor in the kitchen. We said, well, we are okay with this floor. She wouldn't need to, would she accept a lower price? And something that surprised us hugely was that the second garage was full to the brim with stuff, and it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Now we know that this house has been rented out for a number of years, so I don't understand. Either people were told that the garages didn't come with the rental the contract, that we have never managed to find out. Anyway, of course, we inquired with the young lady, how is it with this garage? It's so dirty, so full. She said, don't worry, this is all stuff from the previous tenant. If you saw all the cobwebs and all the dust, the stuff seemed to have been there for a very long time. But we had no doubt, no reason to doubt her. She said that there are ongoing works in the house, which was true. And this is part of what's going to happen. There's still a few weeks before you would move in, so no problem. The thing is, nowadays you can't trust anybody. And we decided to take the house. The landlady accepted the price we were offering. The rental process was extremely complicated. I had the idea that the fact that I am a foreigner made it all a lot more difficult because it took 3 weeks of sheer hell. They went through our finances to the smallest detail, which didn't make sense. We were not buying the house. And even if we are buying the house, there are laws. If you don't pay, there are sanctions. Why 3 weeks of more and more paperwork? Agencies go through the past lives of the tenants, past tenancies, everything. As a tenant, you know nothing about the past history of the house. Did more people have problems here? We don't know. We don't know whether a landlord is a problem landlord. We know nothing at all. We have got to rent a property blindfolded, and they have tried to know everything about us. That's wrong. 3 weeks in the meanwhile, if we are not accepted, we had already lost out on another house that we liked. Time was going by. Nobody would tell us whether we had been accepted, or better, sometimes they would give us the idea that we have been accepted. We would think, wow, the nightmare is finished, it would start all over again. They would even send us emails saying, now it's time to take out your insurance, now that you have been accepted, here are insurances you can take. We'd phone them, okay, have we been accepted? No, you have not. No. Of course not. Then they would send us a contract to sign. We'd read through it, okay, it's acceptable, sign. A few days later, the contract would be cancelled without a word, which we never understood. They did that at least twice. We'd like to find proof of those contracts, but because they were online, they disappeared, they were cancelled, so we can't. We have the idea even that there was at least one clause that was changed. When Colin read the first contract, as I am a foreigner, it's a lot easier for Colin to read all those pages and pages of legal stuff. And he came to me right away and he said, that's good. We have at least 1 year and they can't throw us out for 1 year. So the contract is 3 years, but at least for 1 year, we have security. After 1 year, we can cancel or they can tell us to go. What appears now is that actually in the final contract, it wasn't one year anymore, it was 6 months, and they probably counted on us not reading that final contract, because we had already read 1 or 2 contracts prior to that, so we just thought it was a formality. We signed. Again, we live in a society where you can't trust anybody. We have been through so much here. To give you an idea, the garage was never emptied or cleaned, so in the end there was no garage, not 2, no 1, none. In order to try to have it emptied and cleaned, we had, we were moving in, all the stress, and we are fighting. There were broken lights at the end. If the lights are not all working, you pay a lot of money for each light they replace, but they have the right to leave the lights broken. There was even one that was just falling down. We didn't look at it after all, as they didn't do anything. Colin managed later to put it up again, but the bulb was kind of broken out of the chandelier. And emails back and forth, and you start realizing that they have no respect for you. You have no rights. You start being more and more depressed, trying to settle down. It was horrendous. When we arrived the first time after we got the key, again, there was somebody doing the inventory. The gentleman went out and called our attention. One side of the house was full of rubbish. I had never been in the garden because the day we viewed, there was no key for us to go to the garden. When on earth do you view a house and you can't go outside and view properly what you are renting? But there was no key. And of course we had to go back to Wales, so we couldn't say we come tomorrow and we view the garden. And anyway, you can't take too much time deciding, because otherwise you lose the house. You start all over again. It's 2 hours or 2.5 hours to come and to go from Wales here. Of course, we contacted the agency. We said we don't want to live in a house full of rubbish on the side. Oh, it will be cleared or whatever. It never was, as with a lot of things. I think it was when we moved in, there was washing up to be done in the sink in the kitchen. I said, no, there is no way that I pay a lot of money, that I move into a house and I'm going to start doing somebody's washing up. There were leftovers of a meal, so you could see that somebody had left in a hurry and thought, oh, well, these buggers, they can do it. We opened the washing machine underneath There is kind of a ledge, was so full of grease and dirt, was absolutely horrendous. And if you think that the agencies at the end are so precise, every little calc stain on a mirror, they call you, please come and clean it. Any little bit of dust in a corner, do it. Every time we move out, although we are very clean and organized people, we have a few days of a complete nightmare trying to second guess where a little something could be wrong. But when you move in, nobody has to care. Then the fight to get the garage cleaned started. After a lot of emails, we couldn't even put our stuff in, not only cleaned, but even emptied. It was completely full. You could hardly walk through it. Then they decided, okay, it would be emptied, but we had to clean it ourselves. Dirt of decades to clean it ourselves? Really? We had to accept, because by then the lockdown was starting. We needed to settle down. Colin spent 3 hours cleaning the garage. By then I was so disgusted. And anyway, while he was cleaning the garage, I was on the phone with a lady from the main office saying, this is not acceptable. And there were a lot of problems everywhere. In the beginning, the heating was not working properly. It was the middle of March. It was very cold here. Luckily, somehow the heating, then the next few days, it got working. We have 2 bathrooms, but one bathroom, you can't take showers. You can only take baths because the water trickles down. So that was supposed to be Colin's bathroom. He takes showers, but we had to change because the other one has a proper shower. We should have been told about all this. If there was no garage, tell us. You see 2 doors, no garage. The rubbish on the side of the house, it won't be cleared. We have now even found out that there is a very precise law that says you can't mis-sell a property, omissions, or if you hide something from the new tenants or I suppose owners. If you tell lies, that was the case of the garage, the law prohibits that. But how can you make anybody go against a huge agency? Even some lawyers we have talked to are not really willing to do it. Nothing is bad enough, and do you want to go through it? And anyway, having a lawyer would ruin our prospects of a more comfortable old age. We are not rich, but we have a little bit of money to make sure that we'll survive into old age, which would be wiped out. That creates a lot of problems between us, because I think these things need to be corrected and need to be done, and Colin is more laid back and thinks is afraid because they are going to evict us and God knows what. I think evict us. I go down, but I go down fighting with dignity. Emails trying to find out why the young lady lied to us. Is it because of the ruthless ambience in the agency that she has got to rent so many houses? Did she just make up something? Is it company policy? Tell them anything they want to hear, they rent it, and they are nobody, so we couldn't get like. We have no idea whatsoever. In meanwhile, lockdown started easing, and we found out that we are under a flight path of low-flying aircrafts. That was disastrous. The first day was a holiday, beautiful weather. We were in the garden all day, and the aircrafts were flying above our heads every few minutes all day. In the meanwhile, a few days ago, they flew over this area for 13 hours. They even fly during the night. There are days when I can't stand aircrafts anymore. Today has been reasonably quiet. Usually when it is very cloudy, it's quiet. We have had a number of aircrafts in the morning. But we have even already recorded them. We have found articles about this in the paper. But the agency has no responsibility whatsoever, because although we told two offices that we needed a quiet location and why, there is nothing in our file. Nobody knows anything about it. During the first visit, we were very clear with the young lady. Nobody knows anything about it. Colin talked on the phone with another agent. He knows nothing about it. Colin met here in the house for a 1-hour meeting while I was in Cardiff giving a radio interview about tenancy problems, so I wasn't here, but I have no reason to doubt Colin. He met here for a lengthy meeting with that other agent and the landlady. It was all talked about. The landlady was very worried that we would make a lot of noise. And she never said, oh, but this is probably not the place for you, because there are all these aircrafts flying above. If you want to record and sing and everything, it's probably not the place for you. No, nobody ever said a thing. And we are now very tired. We are desperate. Our relationship has been suffering hugely. There are days when I do nothing but cry. I still try to fight. I've been contacting all kinds of journalists. Colin has been contacting a few lawyers. We can go to the small claims court, which is a court where you pay less money. In Wales, it was still quite expensive. Here it is cheaper. But a lawyer has already said, don't count on anybody representing you, because there is no money in it for them, so it's all about money. In Cardiff, we wanted to sue our landlord, but Colin had a 1-hour consultation with a solicitor, and he said, don't count on it, because your landlord is first part of a very powerful family of landlords in Cardiff, so they have the best lawyers. And then there is something else, which is, especially if you get an older judge, he'll never decide in your favor, because older judges don't decide in favor of tenants. How horrible is that? I mean, this is still Europe. This is a first world country. A country that tells the world how good they are and how fair they are and human rights and everything. No, that's not true. Nothing like that exists here. They destroy people's lives. This is driving us into an early grave. My blood pressure, never had blood pressure problems. My blood pressure is through the roof. I've been now rated with very high anxiety and very low mood. Very high blood pressure, did I say it? I also have a lot of concentration problems and memory problems. There are a lot of days when we now do very little other than me dealing with phone calls and emails and trying to find somebody to help us. Other than that, I don't sing anymore, because if you have no joy in your heart, you can't sing. I don't see any future prospects. People say move. After 4 houses, with 4 agencies, with such huge problems, who tells us that we are not going to start all over again somewhere else? There are days where I just feel like screaming. They destroyed our lives. We came here to be nearer to London, to go for more auditions, to act more, because we are actors as well. There are big film studios, Pinewood Studios, close by. I could go busking in London. That's the place where people get discovered. I'm going to be 53 wishful thinking, 63 in a few days, but I thought we have maybe 10 years. and we are going to show the world, you know, all the people have a lot of talent and ambitions and can do a lot of stuff. Give us a chance. No, we are now broken people. Usually today I put a bit of makeup on and so, but usually I just dressed in some other clothes, in some old clothes, and I look very old and tired. And a few days ago I looked at Colin and he looked so tired and so worn out. Nobody deserves this. I won't tell you how much the rent is here or the name of the agency, but it is a huge amount of money. We have been paying for the past 4 years to live in an inferno. I am intending to make a few more of these vlogs to fill you in and to get our story out in the world. If they sue us, they do. I'm just not. I'm not bothered. I'm past caring. For me, my life is finished. Whether we'll stay together, I don't even know. I am willing to put till my last penny into this. If I have nothing to live on after that, I don't care. The only thing I know is that nobody should go through this. The fact that politicians are often landlords too, they make laws, but laws usually don't help tenants in the least. They are now trying to abolish the Section 21 and the no-fault evictions, which doesn't matter because here they just told you have, after 4 months, you can give 2 months notice. Just go. Basically, we have neither rights nor we are. Usually, I say we are pariahs. We are. And when I say we, I'm not talking about the both of us, because if it was just 2 people, you could say, oh, well, bad luck, tough. This is millions of people. Once I did some research and I found out, I think that there are 250,000, I think, evictions a year. They don't know the real numbers. It could be far higher because a lot are not even in any accounted for anywhere. I used to run a Facebook page, action group Rights to Tenants UK now, and the desperation I saw there was horrendous. I ended up closing it because I couldn't help anybody. I just wanted to see if we could create a group and go to Parliament or go to the Welsh Assembly or, you know, scream somewhere. But tenants are so worn out and so tired and so desperate. I heard the absolute horror stories, so I'll stop for now. I'll fill you in a few days again. Right now, there is only darkness ahead of us. Of the journalists, nobody has contacted back. I am now waiting for a solicitor, somebody advice to her, but everywhere now you leave messages and often you don't hear from anybody again. I am having a little bit of emotional support from Mind, but finding therapy is very difficult now. It costs a lot of money as well because most things are private now, and if we are going to put money in solicitors, the money doesn't stretch everywhere. And right now, most of all, we need somebody, you know, a feisty solicitor who says, this has got to finish. These things should not be just bad reviews online. They have, that impunity should finish. There have to be sanctions. And these agencies have to learn a lesson. And victims like us should not happen ever again. So sometimes I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. And yeah, if I'm not on YouTube too often, if I comment on your videos too late, please forgive me, but the situation is really bad right now. And if you're a tenant and you have a story to tell, please do leave in the comments. And one day when this is finished, I will tell the world the name of this agency, although there are so many bad ones out there. Take care. Stay safe.